So what I'll do today is run you through a two-part presentation. I'll run through for the first half with some of the excitement, some of the trends in the mobile economy in parts of the world such as Asia, Africa, Latin America. And then I'll show you how a model of global innovation like the Mobile Monday Network plugs into this kind of an ecosystem. This is my first time in Malta, and I discovered to my very pleasant surprise that Malta became independent from the British in the same year that I was born. So I'm sort of joined to the hip with the growth of Malta. So you can guess how old or how young I am, or how much of a midlife crisis I'm having. Anyway, what I'll do is run you through a few examples from a couple of book series which I edit. One is called the Asia Pacific Internet Handbook. You can see I'm a big fan of Star Wars. The first book was episode 4, then episode 5, then episode 6. And I'm going to sell the rights for 1, 2, and 3 to somebody who wants to buy them for $1 million. The next set of book series that I'm looking at is new media within the company. Just as you have social media outside, Twitters and Facebooks on the consumer internet, what's happening now is very interesting. Many companies are taking these same models and flipping them on their intranets. So how to create enterprise 2.0 kinds of networks for innovation, best practices, productivity. These are some very interesting trends. So along with the rise in the consumer external citizen internet, there's a parallel world of innovation emerging in enterprises, what's called Enterprise 2.0, like Web 2.0. And we've also started a book series in Africa. A lot of people seem to think that there's not enough opportunity in Africa, but it's a fantastic continent of emerging opportunity. And we have this book series about what's happening in Africa. The other hat I wear is a world music editor for Rave magazine. As you all know, music is an industry which is both being ripped apart by the internet and being reborn through the iPod and iPhones, iTunes, iPhones, etc. So this is one of the very interesting paradoxes of new media. If you don't understand it properly, it can wreck what you have. If you know how to use it properly, you can build untold fortunes in this era. So how you find that balance between harnessing and coordinating, how you find that balance between needs and wants, between push and pull, is where the magic lies, where the big dance lies in understanding new media. I'll begin with a framework to analyze how different kinds of information societies are evolving around the world and how new media fits into this particular space. I'll run you through a framework that we use in these two book series that I just talked about, the Internet Handbook and the mobile space. The first is how to understand what's happening in the mobile ecosystem in a country. The first thing which obviously comes to mind is how many operators are there, how many people, subscribers are there, how many 3G users are there, what's the cost of the tariffs, etc. That's typical IDC Gartner kind of research. You can get all this stuff from all the big research companies. Then you dig in a little bit. What kind of content are people using on these networks? What is the growth of SMS, voice, data, video, etc. on these networks? Then you come to the more interesting part. That's just the tip of the iceberg. The next part which then arise are who are the people using these kinds of mobile tools? What are some phenomena emerging in user dynamics, whether it's consumer protection rights or whether it is social activism, smart mobs, things of that sort? How do people use Mobile Monday to create and define and shape community interactions? Then you come across the culture of the country. How entrepreneurial is a country's culture? How easy is it to build a big company in a country? How easy is it for people in that country to go global and become global players in different kinds of ecosystems? Then you have capacity. Does the country have the human resource capacity to do what it wants to do in mobile music, mobile movies, in creating 3G networks, WiMAX, Vibro, etc. Then you come to cooperation. How well are the various players in a country connected to each other? Is there a good industry association for legal rights? Is there a good consumer protection agency? Is there a good regulator to balance the needs of consumers and the big players like operators and handset players? Are there enough training organizations to give people certifications perhaps in Java, in mobile game development, etc.? Then there's commerce, which is how do you go beyond just using the phone to get information and communicate to actually transacting? Can you buy and sell on the phone, and what can you do with the phone? So here again, there's a big legal component, there's a big transactive commercial component. And finally, the toughest question in this day and age, who's going to pay for all this stuff? If you want innovation, who's going to put money into growing the whole ecosystem in a country? This is where I think Mobile Monday plays a terrific role as a coordinator, as an orchestrator of people globally interested in mobile, but with a very strong local focus. That is the first part of the dimension of the analysis. And the second part is what I call the 2 I's. You can tell I'm a consultant. I think of 5 P's, 8 C's, 10 I's, 2 I's, etc. So this is the second part of the equation, which is countries differ in A, how they use new media and how they create new media. For instance, some countries are very good in using IT, the internet, mobile phones for music, games, shopping, etc. Other countries are very good in creating handsets, in creating 3G networks, and then marketing them across the globe. Not every country is good in both. Some countries are good in both, and that brings us to the next part of this analysis, which is if you marry the 8 C's and the 2 I's, here is how you see the mobile revolution playing out in countries around the world. There are some countries which, unfortunately, these are all examples from Asia, are very restrictive, countries which have a very tight regulatory control on information, flow of communication, etc. Myanmar, Burma, North Korea, etc. unfortunately are here. Not much in terms of opportunity here for those of us in the entrepreneurial space. Then you have countries like Afghanistan, which are in the embryonic phase. These have decided to come out of their the past. In the case of Afghanistan, their infrastructure was bombed out by both the superpowers. Now they're getting into the whole global economy, etc. They're building infrastructure, etc. So if you are an infrastructure player, terrific place to go to bid for licenses, etc. Then you have countries like Nepal, which will be in the emerging phase for a long time. They haven't had a strict, tough regulatory regime, but Nepal is located right in the middle of the Himalaya mountains. It's tough to dig up half the Himalayas and put cable, etc. everywhere. So they have no choice but to go through wireless and mobile. So for these guys, wireless and mobile means much more than for people like us. There is no other alternative to broadband through wireless in these areas. Then you have a very interesting category like China, which is a country which loves mobile in terms of creating headsets, building companies like Huawei, Haier, exporting them around the world. But they're very nervous about the political freedom which comes with mobile. So every other day you see some article about Google is blocked in China or Twitter is blocked in Iran, something of that sort. Then you have countries like India. Intermediate phase, we don't have those political restrictions, but we have serious divides between village and city in terms of access, infrastructure, electricity, energy, etc. Then you come to countries which are mature. These are countries which have very good levels of economic development, very good mobile penetration, but they haven't gone to the next stage yet, which is becoming global players in handsets, networks. They set standards for communications, etc. That's where countries like Japan and South Korea come in. So for every country, it's for them to figure out where do we want to fit in this equation. Can we progress? How far down this equation can we progress? Where do we fit and what do we want to do? Now, I'll give you some examples to give you actually some case studies of how different countries are doing these kinds of mobile activism, mobile entrepreneurship, and then I'll end with some remarks on what mobile can do in each of these areas. Now, I come from India, part of the world which has superb food, gorgeous people, nice games, but unfortunately we have a big unfortunate share of tsunamis, earthquakes, different kinds of natural disasters. So some of the first emerging applications are, can we come up with ways of doing disaster reporting and relief through mobiles? Can we have a alerting system to alert people about different kinds of accidents, etc.? In countries like Iran, China, a big focus of NGOs, of civil rights organizations is how to open up political space in these countries. Then of course healthcare, we are in the era of AIDS and SARS and H1N1 and all these other very strange diseases. Can mobile help in improving public health awareness about these kinds of issues? And then running down the list to other issues like, say, connecting diaspora. These apply a lot to countries like Asia. India has about 20-25 million people of Indian origin living outside of India. China has about 40 million people of Chinese origin outside of China, all the way down to countries say like the Philippines with 3 million people of Filipino origin living outside the Philippines. For many of these people, SMS payment has become one of the best ways to send money back home to your loved ones. So migrant workers from India, from Sri Lanka, from the Philippines, for instance, who work in the Gulf countries, in Dubai, they all send money back by SMS payment gateways between operators, some kind of a regulatory framework, and the banks, along with their the alliances back home for these financial sectors. All the way down to things like how to improve productivity of the informal labor, productivity of SMEs, etc. I'll give you a few case studies right now. We'll begin with disaster reporting and relief. For the most part, I'll be talking about the consumer internet, citizens using phones, SMS, etc. But there's another whole world emerging called the Internet of Things. When you start connecting all the different objects with RFID, with Zigbee, with wireless HART and all these other industrial wireless protocols. So when the Internet of People, that's us, and when the Internet of Things start intersecting, very interesting kinds of things start emerging in this space. So for instance, everything from mesh networks to WiMAX in a box, all of these have been used in some of these unfortunate disasters. Here, for instance, is a snapshot of a newspaper in Malaysia, which began to raise funds for the victims of a hurricane, of a cyclone in Myanmar, just across the border from Thailand. And they raised money through an SMS payment campaign. So they told people, if you want to pay, send an SMS and tell us how much money you want to donate to so-and-so fund. That money will be directed from your bank account or from it'll appear on your bill, etc. This is from an earthquake in China, in the aftermath of an earthquake in China. Some of the leading portals and the operators, as well as the government agencies, began to use SMS to spread awareness about where the next possible aftershocks are going to come from and how to raise